Last week, Tuesday, the Education Committee met and we discussed what does data look like when it comes to literacy, English language arts in the Oshkosh Area School District. One of the common questions that's been asked by the board is, are we moving the needle when it comes to data in literacy? And so we spent almost 2 hours, plus hours in Education Committee doing that. And so we reviewed the data, the internal data, the external data, and what are the strategies that we are doing within the Oshkosh Area School District at that Education Committee meeting. And a lot of questions were raised. There were a lot of answers, and there was a lot of discussion between board members and our executive team and other staff to really clarify about what is being addressed when it came to literacy. The conclusion I hope that everybody saw is that we are moving the needle when it comes to data. None of it is going to be a fast fix, but we are moving and our students are growing. One of the things that I said at that meeting was that we need to have high expectations for all of our students, and everybody needs to be growing. And as long as we do those two things, we will continue to move the needle. And as you're going to see tonight in our district and school report card, we have made progress once again. So we have lots to be proud of in the Oshkosh Area School District, and I'm going to highlight some of those things this evening. So from a previous presentation, you know that the Wisconsin state assessment system consists of the ACT Spire, the Wisconsin Forward Exam, and the dynamic learning maps for grades 3 through 11. Our state and district report cards are based off on those state assessments, and they were released back on November 21st. You received our district press release along with our district report card, and every single school sent out a newsletter or a letter along with their school's individual report card to their school community and to their families. Within our strategic plan, the data that's around school report cards and our district report card lies in priority 1 and priority area 5, because we always link back to report cards. And within our levels of strategic plan measures, as we start to look at this, school and district report cards lie in those upper levels, and actually it's in level 2 and level 3 that we are going to be looking at tonight when it comes to district metrics. And so the school and state report card is a measure of how we are doing on our strategic plan, because everything within those priority areas is pulling towards student learning. And once again, we'll be looking at the levels and layers of accountability, and this really is tonight talking about a district-wide indicator. Within a school report card, each of you received in your board packet the Oshkosh Area School District report card. All school district report cards and school report cards are available on the DPI website, and that link was sent out with all of our notifications. So if you're curious, you can go out and you can look at any school, any district, and their scores. It's always very interesting to see how everything falls out. But within that, there are 4 priority areas, whether it's a school report card or a district report card that is looked at. Those priority areas look at student achievement. In other words, did students reach a proficiency level for that particular grade level? Looks at student growth. And in the student growth measure, it's really looking at a cohort, the same group of students over a number of years. And what's different from last year and this year, the school report cards changed. There was no school report card in 2015. And during that time, the state assessments changed over, and also growth is calculated using a value-added formula. So in other words, students, when we look at growth and we look at a cohort of students, we're comparing them to their peers across the state. Then there is a closing the gap score, and that's in the performance between a specific student group and members of that non-group. So for example, if you were looking at a student group economically disadvantaged, we would be comparing how economically disadvantaged students do compared to non-economically disadvantaged students. And we would be looking at, is there a gap in their achievement? And then the last priority area is on track to post-secondary readiness. And this is a measurement of high school graduation and other potential factors that lead to or predict out high school graduation, and that is 3rd grade reading achievement and 8th grade math achievement. Those are also 2 areas that the board has chosen to review on their scorecard when it comes to strategic plan priority areas, because that is a predictor and is a good predictor of how we're going to do on our school and district report cards. So those are the areas. The priority areas are weighted on a school report card. So schools for elementary and middle school, each of those areas are weighted equally, and they have a 25% weight each. High school is different. High school, the only assessment that is looked at for high school is the ACT at grade 11. And so since that is the only assessment that is looked at, there is no growth score because you don't have the ACT prior years. And so student achievement and closing gaps are weighted each at 40%, and then on-track to post-secondary readiness is 20%. Because of that weighting, and because only the ACT is used as the assessment piece, across the state, high school report cards are lower than K-8 schools. Because it's really hard on the ACT to show closing the gaps and to reach that bar, because it's a really rigorous assessment. So across the state, you may have elementaries and middle schools that are performing really well at the different levels, but high schools are lower, and that is also the case here in the Oshkosh Area School District. So it's expected. So for the Oshkosh Area School District, our report card, we scored in meets expectation, and that's really almost the top of the meets expectation category. And when I saw the score, I'm like, come on, we just need a few more points, and we're going to get there, So we are at 71.8. That is up from last year by 3 points. We're up from last year by 3 points. It was 68.3, I believe it was, or 68.8 the year prior. And the big areas for growth, the big highlighted areas, are in our district growth scores, because across the district you're going to see our students have really grown, especially when compared to their like peers. The Oshkosh Area School District is doing a great job of working with students with limited English proficiency, our economically disadvantaged, our special education students. We're really moving the needle with those high expectations and everybody growing. So district growth has been a big highlight. You can see up there that the state average score is at 66, and we're at 73.6 for the Oshkosh Area School District. So that's statistically significant. We've gone up as a district in our closing the gap scores. We're still not exactly where we want to be, and at the literacy, or at the education committee meeting when we talked about literacy, we talked about some of those challenges with closing the gaps, and we continue to be above the state average when it comes to on track to post-secondary readiness. Our graduation rates are really helping us in that score area. So we're doing a great job. It's asked for us quite a bit, how are we doing compared to other school districts? So if you go out into the DPI website, you can download this Excel spreadsheet that has thousands of lines of data. I was pretty excited to do that. I know I'm a little geeky when it comes to data, but it was pretty exciting to do that. And went out there and started to look at what would really truly be a comparable to the Oshkosh Area School District. And there's a couple ways that you can look at this. When you're looking at districts, Oshkosh really needs to compare itself to other like districts. And like for us really has to do with size, because there's a big difference in how you can move a small district versus how you move a larger district with 21 buildings. It's a lot easier to move when you have a school district that is the size of one of our high schools versus 10,000 students. So as you start to look at this, we have up here districts that are a little bit smaller, that are a little bit under 10,000, and that are a little bit above 10,000. Green Bay, Madison, Milwaukee would not be a comparable, because those are really metro districts. And as you can see, Oshkosh lands solidly in the middle of those other school districts. You can see Oshkosh has moved, but other school districts like us are also moving and doing things with students, because they're trying to reach those same targets, those high expectations for students as well. I also put on there the percent economically disadvantaged, because you can see with those like-sized districts, we tend to be in the same, once again, range when it comes to the percent of students that are economically disadvantaged, and that makes a difference. Up here, I have a graph that shows our regional comparables, because the other thing is that we're also compared to school districts that are touching and surrounding us. And so where we land with that looks a little bit different, but once again, it's hard to compare when you have a small district versus a large district. And you can see where Oshkosh lands with our overall accountability score compared to the region and other districts that touch us. And then I also laid out that on the slide comparable size districts, and once again Oshkosh is right there in the middle with comparable sides. And I can see that a lot of you, so that you can see this a little bit better, you're taking advantage of the presentation that was shared with you so that you can see the numbers a little bit better. Yes.
They're not even looking at her.
Yeah, exactly. No, so that's I noticed that right
Well, I
away.
just
So-
noticed it because everybody has it up, and I keep looking, and I'm like, why am I the only one? How did they figure this out? And I was like, she probably emailed it to us, so I just.
Yes. So, and then that way you also have it. But sometimes it's easier to look at numbers, especially in the charts, when you have that in front of you. So one other thing that I pointed out to the board last year, and I've done analysis on, is that standardized tests and the whether a child is economically disadvantaged or not, being economically disadvantaged is a great predictor of how you're going to do on a standardized test. And really what we're shooting for and what we're trying to move is to overcome that. We want to beat the odds, so to speak. The overall accountability measures that we're using as a state, your percent economically disadvantaged for a district or a school is still the best predictor of how you're going to do. So here is all Wisconsin school districts up here on the graph. And as you can see, there is a direct relationship between the percent economically disadvantaged for the district and their overall accountability scores. If you start to look at the outliers and you're going, okay, so where is a school district that has high percent economically disadvantaged and they have a high accountability score? When you start to look at those school districts, they're very small rural school districts with less than 500 students. And so once again, we can look at the curriculum pieces, but once again, it's kind of hard to replicate what's going on there because it's a totally different environment. But we can start looking at our comparables though and saying, are there districts that are outliers, and what can we learn from them? So taking the top 33 largest districts and looking at that, once again, it's a direct relationship between the percent economically disadvantaged and their overall accountability score. And you may be going, where is Oshkosh on this graph? And there we are, right there. And so once again, we actually are performing a little bit better than what our percent economically disadvantaged would predict for us. So we're firmly in the middle. And then if we start to lay out our Oshkosh area school district schools and percent economically disadvantaged, we're seeing that trend is a little bit more all over the place, but it's still basically the same trend as well. But how did individual schools do? Up here we have high schools, and as you can see with both high schools, I talked about that the ACT is the only assessment piece that's included in the school report cards. West High School went up a category. Last year they met few expectations, so they went up a little bit. North they also went up in points, but they didn't cross the bar into meets expectation. So they're still in the same category. Going into our middle schools did a really nice job. All middle schools exceeded or significantly exceeded. But as you can see, they all stayed in the same category. But every single middle school went up in their accountability scores, even though they stayed in the same category. So that's great. That's great news. Then going on to our elementary schools. Our elementary schools, you're going to start to see like a little caret indicator on there. This school year, because of the value added score and this is the second time within that formula that they used a value added score, they wanted to note that as you start to look at the data, that they're saying that this school went up, and it went up more than we had predicted with the formula. And it's not saying that it's not valid, but be cautious when you start to look at that number because there was such a big fluctuation. If you recall from the November 28th Education Committee meeting, anytime that you see a big jump or a big drop in scores, that makes you think, what's going on with the formula, what's going on with the data, and the state of Wisconsin and DPI is just saying, as you start to look at this and you see some of the big either jumps or decreases, to just be cautious because there could be some additional fluctuations when you go into the next school year. Because as the formula adds additional years into that trend, the formula is going to stabilize, but we're only on year 2. So please take that into account. So you can see where our elementary schools are at. We had 2 elementary schools that were in the meets few category, and the rest of our elementary schools are all in meets or exceeds or significantly exceeds. And eCook is up a category. As you go into the next set of schools, Jefferson Elementary is up 2 categories. And then you can see also Roosevelt and Smith Elementary schools are up 2 categories. And Oakwood is still in the same category. So we definitely had some movement in our elementary schools. Most of that movement is due to closing the gaps or growth scores, which is a good thing. So if you look at the overall improvement, the overall impact, we had 7 schools overall that went up a category. We had 1 school that went down a category. Then if you look at our numbers here, 18% of our students or our schools are in significantly exceeds, 27% approximately are in exceeds. The majority of our schools meet expectations, and we have 13% of our schools meet few expectations. But once again, note that there were some schools that did jump more than 10 points, and they just put that caution on there that that value-added formula is adding for score fluctuations, and we could see that again next year. So, some cautions and conclusions as you start to look at this. And once again, if you want to look deeper at this, if you want to look deeper into each of the detailed report cards, those are all available on the DPI website, and you can go to our website and get the link to take you directly there. Standardized testing data is lagging indicator, so this is all for performance from last year. And this is a moving target. We talked about this at the November 28th Education Committee meeting, that as we are improving and finding evidence-based and research-based strategies that work with kids, every other school district and every other school is chasing after that target and that higher student achievement as well. So keep in mind that as we start to compare ourselves, they're moving as well. And so everybody's growing, and so are we growing and closing the gaps faster than our like districts? Each student at grade level at a minimum of 1 year's growth is where we really need to be, and we are working towards that, if not surpassing that in some schools. And then I say this all the time, schools are more than just a number and a score, because there are great things that are going on. Recall the superintendent's good news report of all the things that are doing there. And then this is a starting point for identifying areas of need. And once again, at the Education Committee meeting on November 28th, we talked about the strategies of the student data inquiry model that we are using in order to use data as that flashlight. And I say this as well. The good news is that it takes all of us to ensure that all students are college, career, and community ready. And so we look at closing the gap scores, and we want to close those gaps because we know all students deserve the best and they deserve to be ready. And we also know that the longer students are with us, the better students are performing. And it all takes time. So